for all the technical talk about old school gaming, especially old school Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of us forget to tell new players that are going to try the old school a certain approach that they should have. Don't look at old school like an anime, right? More realistic, more grindy, more like a Lord of the Rings, right? Something in that vein. When you go to start making a character, we don't really believe that you over-pitch things during character creation. So anything unique, in most cases, we would prefer you to do that in the game. And, some of the older DMs really understand there's limitations, and they don't want to, downplay your excitement, but they think, these things are going to be a struggle. They're going to be hard to do. They don't want to say no to something, but they definitely don't want you to have this stuff during character creation. There's a reason. They see it as blowing up the game if you're given too much too fast, right? It creates a superhero. You hear the criticism about your 5e games, right? That it's like a superhero game. Well, they don't want you having that much. Everything is slow paced to manage the game, right? So it lasts longer. So campaigns are longer than 6 sessions, like to get somewhere and do something, right? So when you come to the old school, don't think in the terms that you're used to. And don't think of builds. Like old school D&D, there's just not as many options for the characters. So there's not this major build video game type of approach. It's almost no good to you. Like there's an extreme limitation. There's only so much you can do. So there's not these crazy builds. Here's what I tell new players when I take them into my game, like old school D&D. I want you to come at this less worried about your build and more worried about who your character is. I don't care if there's 2 fighters in the group and they both have swords. I don't care about these things because we don't focus on the build. We focus on who the character is. Like Doug and James are going to be very different people, even though they're both fighters that wear chain shirts, have swords, same sword, but they're different people, very different people. And I want you to focus on that being important because there's not as many options. Like we're not using feats. We're not using all these other things that you're using with WotC D&D. Don't get me wrong, it's not like old school D&D drills on roleplay, but for a lot of DMs, because of the lack of options, roleplay becomes a big issue. And roleplay and character development is a deep part of the game that lets you separate, the characters. There's not just... The character build is not the same, so the enhancement of the character is usually who they are, right? So roleplay becomes important. And even for people that don't totally focus on it in D&D, if they play a very long campaign, players will just simply develop the characters, and you'll hear a lot of great stories. And it's about who the character is. It might take a long time for them to figure that part out. That was the most important part, because they go through a slow character development process. I would prefer it go faster, and I have techniques for that, but a lot of old school guys that never aimed at roleplay would still do a bit and a bit and a bit, and after a while, you realize that's important. I would say even to the new school, that part is important. Like, the character build is whatever. Here's what you're really looking to do with a role-playing game. It's not just play the game, but to create memories. Important memories that paint your experience. Like, let you remember the experience you had. And the experience is more important than just, say, winning the fight. Right? Like, here. A player that can really enjoy themselves can be losing the battle and make a joke that cracks everyone at the table with the character, because it's not to downplay what's going on. What I mean is make the joke because it's more about just playing the game. The death is meaningless. Winning or losing, it means nothing. Right? Once a player realizes that it's more about the memory and the experience, and then they'll be less shy about just playing the character for who they are, even if it leads to character death, because it's more important about creating the memories and doing the crazy thing and having that experience than it is worrying about the character build. I know lots of players in the old school that made very weak fighters, as you would, new school would see it, right? Bad stats, the whole nine. But run in, have a great time, get into the fight, just excitement. and never scared of things, not worried about that if the character wasn't someone who was afraid. Like, they didn't worry about stats in the same way many new players do. And you should really try to separate like an anime type of like crayon view onto the game, especially with the new art that you see from WotC. Like, take that out of your head. Go look at TSR art, and you get closer to what most DMs are going after. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't like some cartoony DMs back in the day, but they're a minority in the old school. The old school is more like, look at the TSR art. That's what we're after. Grindy, dark, stuff like that. So now, beyond the technical stuff that you have to learn the game, you'll have a better understanding of what you're doing when you approach an old school Dungeon Master. Don't bring all these assumptions from the WotC editions of D&D. Understand that there may be similarities, but in reality they are very different games, right? It's just a different approach, a different view. And that creates a different game. And there are many different rules in old school than there is in new school. And there's a lot of new school rules that don't exist in old school. So understand you're really coming to a different game. Like, that's a big issue. I see a big fault line is the assumptions that are made by WotC D&D players that come to TSR D&D. And it's not going to match up, right? And you fall into, like, a lot of these new players can become disappointed as they see there's not a bunch of options in the way it would be for the newer games, right? Anyway, for now, take care. You know what you can do? You can hit the like button. You can share the video. Oh, and there's another button you can press. That one that lets you subscribe to my channel for more content. Oh yeah, there's that bell thing. You can press that so you know when I've uploaded a new video right away.